You can see the inside of that one there, pretty dang meaty. Man, those are just really good and refreshing. I got it all over my face. What's up, Lazy Dog fam? Hope all y'all are having an awesome day. It is Monday, July 1st here in South Georgia, and we are smack dab in the middle of tomato harvest season around here. So I want to walk you around, show you the varieties we've got growing, show you some of these beautiful tomatoes we've been getting, compare and contrast the outside, the fruit size, the inside, how meaty they are. We're going to do a lot of tomato talking on this video today. So the last time we were out here talking about tomatoes, which I think was 2 weeks ago today, we had a few more plants that were dying and that we had lost. I've since cut all those, and we haven't lost any more plants. All the plants we have growing now are the same ones we had growing 2 weeks ago. So we've kind of thinned out the bad ones, and the ones we have left are really kicking. So let's start off with our indeterminates, where we have a pair of plants here and then a pair of plants kind of down there on the end of the row. Right here we've got these Cherokee carbon plants for our little makeshift additional trellis support that we added. It's holding up okay, but some of that string starting to give way a little bit. These plants are still just wide open and loaded down with some huge fruits. So we've been able to contain these plants somewhat, not completely. If we look down in here, we can see still getting a few escapees from time to time. That's a monster down there on the ground. So the plant vigor or toughness on those Cherokee carbon plants is one thing. I've rarely seen an indeterminate that could hang with a lot of my determinate varieties, and that one so far this year is hanging really well. So impressed a ton by the vigor of the plants, but almost even more impressed with the size of these fruits here. Now that one there is pretty average, but some of these are just absolutely massive. So I've been picking most of these when the shoulders are still a little green. This is that big one I showed you that was sitting on the ground earlier. And then we take them inside, let them sit on the counter, and then let them kind of get dark red, purplish color, and they get a little softer. And this one here is primed to be eaten. So we've got vigorous plants, we've got some nice big pretty fruits. The next thing everybody wants to know is, do they taste any good? So let's cut a slice off this one right here, and I'll kind of give you my thoughts. So you can kind of see the inside of it there. Pretty dang meaty tomato. Got me a nice little disc or sample right there. And it's really good. I would say maybe not quite as acidic and heirloomy tasting as something like a Black Krim or a Paul Robeson, but it's pretty dang close. Now this Cherokee carbon is a hybrid, so obviously you can't save seeds from it like you could an heirloom, say like Black Krim or Paul Robeson. That's pretty comparable to this tomato here. But I think the plant vigor, the production of it, is going to outweigh all that. You're not giving up much on flavor here, but you're gaining a ton on vigor and production. So Cherokee carbon, huge winner in my book. So glad we decided to try this variety, and definitely one we'll grow again next year. Now moving on from the Cherokee carbon to our second pair of indeterminate plants that made it so far. We've got these two Turkey Creek plants here. Not all our Turkey Creek plants made it, but these two right here did. Had to add a little shade cloth because we were getting some significant leaf curl. Still getting a little bit of leaf curl, but it appears we have stopped the bleeding a little bit. So I don't know how much longer these plants are going to stick around. We're not getting any more blooms on top there. This variety doesn't appear to like to set blooms once it gets kind of July hot around here. But we have harvested a decent amount of tomatoes off of these so far, and still got a few more to go. There's some monsters right there. Lost a few to the ground. I need to scoop those up and take those inside. Maybe they'll still ripen. Still got a few decent sized honkers on there, but not getting any more up top. So that may be all we get right down here. So I don't necessarily get the consistency out of the Turkey Creek that I like. It's kind of one of those varieties you plant 4 or 5 plants and hope you get 1 or 2 to make it. I know not everybody has that much room in their garden to play around that much, but if you can get some of these to ripen, they are absolutely delicious. There's that cluster I showed you earlier. Some monsters right there. We'll let these ripen inside. I've already eaten a few monsters from those Turkey Creek plants. This one right here, not necessarily a monster, but it is one that's pretty close to being perfectly ripe, and I want to show you the inside on these. So these Turkey Creeks here are some of the meatiest tomatoes I have ever seen. I've seen them look even meatier than this one does here. This one's got a little bit of a bad spot on it there, but you can see not a whole lot of gel in there. It's mostly mater meat, and these things right here are just so good. It's hard to describe why they're so good, but they're so acidic. If you don't like acidic tomatoes, you probably won't like these, but these are some of the most acidic tomatoes I have ever had. Just really, really strong tomato flavor on these things. So those were our 2 indeterminants that we have left. Now let's talk about these determinants here. And now is the time of year when we're starting to pick buckets off these things. Titus and I picked a bucket the other day. Probably time to pick another bucket or 2. As I showed you a couple weeks ago, the bottom of these plants don't look that great, but they're still absolutely loaded with tomatoes and giving us lots of good fruits. Now these 2 Roadster plants right here have outgrown my Florida weave a little bit and fallen over. I need to figure out kind of a way to jerry rig that and get that standing back up, because if those get loaded down with some tomatoes at the tips there, ooh, I'm not sure they can hang on. That might break the plant. Anyways, so many more tomatoes to be harvested on these plants here. Just, you know, typical consistent production we see with these 2 varieties every single year we grow them. So both the Roadster and Red Snapper are pretty dang similar. When I get them laid out on a towel inside, I really can't tell them apart. The majority of them are about this size right here. A few of them are a little smaller, this size right here. One thing I like about both of these varieties, they do give you some really nice big slicing tomatoes. Now, if they are so similar, you may be wondering, well, why do you grow both? Well, just varies from year to year. Some years Roadster will outperform Red Snapper just by a hair, and then some years seems like Red Snapper may outperform Roadster just by a hair. And traditionally, Roadster is a little bit earlier than Red Snapper. Now, it wasn't this year, really can't explain that, but in past years it does come in and give us some ripe tomatoes a little earlier than Red Snapper does. And since we cut into a tomato from those other 2 varieties, let's cut open one of these here. I can show you the inside. Nice, just regular old round tomato there. Really good production, really good plant vigor. And these taste really good too. Nothing wrong with that. Now obviously you're not going to get quite the acidity with this Red Snapper or Roadster that you do say with this Turkey Creek Heirloom here, but we can count on these a lot more than we can count on these. Nice to have both. Nothing wrong with having too many tomatoes. We can always give tomatoes away, but we know we're going to get some tomatoes from these. We cross our fingers and hope we're going to get some tomatoes from these. And then the last determinant we've got growing here at the front of the rows is BHN Gold, and I couldn't be happier with how this one has performed, especially considering we've never grown it before. It's hanging in there really well with the Red Snapper and Roadster up there on the top part of the row. We can see a few right there that are starting to turn. I'll probably go ahead and pick those. They will get a little more golden or yellow than that. So I've got a doozy right here that I harvested a few days ago. Now they all haven't been this big. Most of them have been just a hair bit smaller than this, kind of like that pear I showed you earlier. But since I had this nice one on the counter, I figured I'd bring it out here and show it off. And believe it or not, there's a decent amount of the population that has never had anything but a red tomato. Anytime we post pictures of these, people always ask us, well, what do they taste like? And I think the best way to describe it, they're not as acidic as a red tomato. They have less acidity and tend to have some kind of citrusy notes to them. You can see the inside of that one there, pretty dang meaty. Man, those are just really good and refreshing. I got it all over my face. So if you want something that looks different than a red tomato, you want to grow some colorful tomatoes, but maybe you struggle with heirlooms, you can't go wrong with this BHN Gold hybrid right here. Really good flavor on these, really good plant vigor, really good production, and you know, definitely a winner in my book. So juicy too. Man, it's getting all over me. So that's all the Mater goodness we got going on in the in-ground garden. Now let me give you an update on a few of these varieties we got growing in the raised beds. So we still got these 3 cherry tomato plants here. These look bare now because earlier we just picked a big old bowl full of these. They're sitting on our kitchen counter right now. So no real ripe ones on the plants. The Toranginas, which are on the end there, hanging in there pretty well considering how hot it's been. I think I'm pretty close to pulling that Supernova grape plant in the middle. We should still get a little more production out of these Toranginas here. And then over here in this bed, we've got 3 of those Everglades cherry tomato plants on my right, and then on my left, we've got 3 of those GMO purple tomato plants. Now we're not anywhere close to having any ripe ones yet. We planted these kind of late, but we've got some pretty nice looking clusters right there. And one thing that has impressed me a little bit, especially considering the fact these plants just took forever to take off. Look at all those blooms up top there. We're still getting a lot of blooms being made and a decent amount of fruit being set, even with it being 95, 96, 97, 98 degrees out here lately. So I would expect that from this Everglades cherry, but definitely wasn't expecting that from this purple GMO tomato here. I had written this thing off as just not having any vigor about it whatsoever, but it has surprised me a little bit lately. And as those purple GMO tomatoes ripen in other people's gardens, I have started to see some videos going around, people assessing how they taste. Saw one guy say that it was just absolutely amazing. He showed the inside, it looked really, really pretty. So he raved and raved about it. I've seen other people say, meh, it's just about average, nothing really to write home about. And I'll be sure to give that purple tomato a fair assessment if and when we get some ripe fruits from it. As for now, I'm going to continue enjoying some of these delicious babies right here. And I should mention, these Turkey Creeks right here, I'm going to try to abstain from eating every single one I get off those plants. I'm going to try to save a few for seeds. I know we have a few, or had a few seeds available this year, had a few people that were able to grow these. Hopefully I'll have more next year. So we're going to try to save some seeds from these. I'm going to try not to eat all of them. So I hope you enjoyed the video today. I hope you enjoyed seeing some of those delicious tomatoes we've got growing around here. And if you want to know how we feed our tomato plants, kind of the schedule we're on and what we use, watch this video right here that we did way back when these plants were smaller. We'll show you the whole process, how we mix it up, and how we give it to the plants. So check that out, and we'll see you next time right here at Lazy Dog Farm.